There are countries shaped by history, and then there are countries shaped by the earth itself. Ethiopia belongs to the second kind. A land lifted high above the rest of Africa by ancient volcanic force, where mountain ranges rise like weathered fortresses, where deserts crack open beneath impossible heat, and where rivers begin journeys that will cross continents before reaching the sea. This is one of the oldest inhabited places on Earth, a country where human civilization stretches so far into the past that time itself begins to feel visible in the landscape. To travel through Ethiopia is to move through layers of existence: geological time, biblical time, imperial time, modern time, all living together beneath the same sky. In the north, stone churches emerge from mountains, as though carved by silence itself. In the east, ancient Muslim cities still wake to the sound of prayer, drifting through narrow alleyways. Beyond them lie lava deserts and sulfur fields, so alien they seem borrowed from another planet entirely. And in the south, tribes continue traditions that survived empires, borders, and centuries of change. This is a country of extremes. A place where frost covers highland plateaus at dawn, while the Danakil Depression sinks into temperatures among the hottest on Earth. A place where gelada monkeys roam cliffs above the clouds, and where coffee ceremonies unfold with the patience of sacred ritual in the very country where coffee was first discovered. And yet, Ethiopia cannot be understood through facts alone. Because what defines this country is not simply its altitude, or its history, or even its beauty. It is the feeling of endurance that lives here, the sense that the land itself remembers everything: kingdoms, migrations, prayers, famines, victories, songs. Ethiopia carries memory differently than most places, not as nostalgia, but as presence. The mountains still guard monasteries that have stood for centuries. Ancient languages are still spoken in marketplaces. Farmers still plow fields with methods older than many nations. And across the highlands, the rhythm of daily life continues with a quiet dignity that feels untouched by the speed of the modern world. This is one of Africa's great civilizations, but also one of its most misunderstood. Because beyond the headlines and assumptions exists another Ethiopia entirely. One of cathedral mountains and mirror-like lakes, of medieval castles and volcanic fire, of green valleys where children run through eucalyptus forests beneath skies washed silver by altitude. And perhaps that is what makes this country unforgettable. Not because it reveals itself easily, but because it asks you to slow down long enough to truly see it. So, from the rock-hewn churches of the north to the volcanic deserts of the east, from ancient kingdoms to remote tribal valleys, this journey begins in a land unlike anywhere else on Earth. A land still shaped by fire, faith, and time. There are places built on the earth and places carved directly into it. Lalibela belongs to the second kind. Hidden within the highlands of northern Ethiopia, this sacred town is home to 11 medieval churches carved downward into solid volcanic rock nearly 900 years ago. Entire buildings were not constructed stone by stone, but excavated from single masses of earth, as though sculptors had uncovered them rather than created them. And the first sight of them feels almost impossible. A place where narrow trenches disappear into darkness, where ancient passageways twist beneath the surface of the mountain, and where giant crosses emerge from red volcanic stone beneath soft highland light. Priests wrapped in white cotton robes move silently between shadowed corridors, while the sound of prayer echoes through chambers lit only by candles and sunlight falling from above. The churches seem hidden from the world itself. Especially Church of St. George, carved in the shape of a perfect cross, descending deep into the rock like a secret protected by centuries of devotion. During Ethiopian Orthodox celebrations, thousands gather here dressed entirely in white, transforming the stone landscape into a sea of movement and prayer. But what makes Lalibela extraordinary is not only its architecture, it is the fact that these churches remain living places of worship, not ruins, not monuments, living sanctuaries. And standing inside them, surrounded by stone, shaped by faith and time, Ethiopia begins to feel less like a country and more like a civilization still breathing through its past. The Simien Mountains rise from northern Ethiopia like the broken edge of a continent. Formed by volcanic eruptions millions of years ago, this highland wilderness contains some of Africa's tallest peaks, including Ras Dashen, which stands more than 4,500 meters above sea level. Early explorers once described the landscape as one of the most dramatic mountain regions anywhere on Earth. And from above, it looks almost unreal. A place where cliffs fall thousands of feet into green valleys, where clouds drift beneath jagged ridgelines, and where waterfalls disappear into endless depth. Light moves constantly across the mountains here, turning entire walls of rock gold at sunrise and deep blue by evening. Eagles circle through cold air, while giant lobelia plants rise from the plateau like prehistoric sculptures. Then come the geladas. Found almost nowhere else on Earth, these rare monkeys spend their days grazing peacefully across the grasslands in enormous groups. Males sit at cliff edges, surrounded by flowing manes, staring across the mountains with startling calm, while walia ibex balance effortlessly along impossible ledges above the abyss. The simians feel ancient in a way few landscapes do. Not untouched, but enduring. A place where silence stretches so wide that even the wind seems to move more carefully. There are landscapes that challenge human survival, and then there is the Danakil Depression. Located more than 100 meters below sea level, this volcanic basin in eastern Ethiopia is among the hottest inhabited places on Earth. Temperatures regularly climb beyond 50 degrees Celsius, while tectonic plates slowly pull apart beneath the surface, reshaping the land in real time. And everything here feels alive. A place where sulfur springs glow neon yellow and green, where acid pools bubble beside black volcanic rock, and where the ground exhales steam through cracks in the Earth's crust. Salt flats stretch toward the horizon beneath blinding sunlight, while camel caravans move slowly across the desert, carrying blocks of salt harvested by hand, using methods unchanged for centuries. Then comes Dalol, one of the strangest geothermal landscapes on the planet, where mineral deposits create fields of orange, lime, white, and toxic turquoise, so vivid they resemble painted canvas rather than geology. Nothing about it appears natural, and yet every color comes directly from the earth itself. But the Danakil is not empty. The Afar people have survived here for generations, adapting to conditions most humans could scarcely endure. Their resilience transforms the landscape from hostile to deeply human. And perhaps that is what stays with you most. Not the heat, or the colors, or even the volcanic violence beneath the ground, but the realization that life somehow continues here against all odds. In the Ethiopian highlands stands a city that feels unexpectedly European at first glance, until the details begin to reveal something entirely its own. Once the capital of the Ethiopian Empire, Gondar became a center of royal power in the 17th century under Emperor Fasilides. Within its walls rose castles, banquet halls, libraries, and towers, unlike anything else in sub-Saharan Africa. And together, they form a skyline few travelers expect to find here. A place where stone fortresses rise above cypress trees, where arched windows overlook royal courtyards, and where faded staircases spiral toward rooftops washed in mountain light. The walls carry traces of Portuguese, Indian, and Ethiopian influence all at once, creating architecture that feels both familiar and entirely singular. Beyond the castles lies Debre Birhan Selassie Church, known for its ceiling painted with hundreds of wide-eyed angel faces gazing downward in endless rows. Sunlight filters through small windows onto centuries-old murals that still glow with color and devotion. But Gondar's soul appears most clearly during Timkat, the Ethiopian Orthodox celebration of Epiphany. For a few extraordinary days, the city transforms into music, prayer, water, and procession. White robes flood the streets, drums echo through the night, faith becomes visible everywhere. And suddenly, Gondar no longer feels like a relic of the past, but a kingdom still alive inside memory. Harar is a city built behind walls, carrying centuries of trade, religion, and mystery inside its narrow streets. For more than 1,000 years, this eastern Ethiopian city stood as one of the Islamic world's most important cultural centers. Merchants once arrived here from Arabia, India, and across Africa, turning Harar into a crossroads where languages, spices, and beliefs met beneath desert skies. And the old city still feels wonderfully labyrinthine. A place where alleyways twist between brightly painted houses, where baskets hang from walls like woven mosaics, and where the scent of coffee and incense drifts through hidden courtyards. Light spills softly across stone pathways, while children run past ancient doorways colored blue, green, and gold. But Harar becomes truly unforgettable after sunset. Every night, outside the city walls, wild hyenas emerge from the darkness. And for generations, local hyena feeders have called them close by hand, offering scraps to animals feared almost everywhere else in the world. The relationship is strange, intimate, and deeply woven into the city's identity. Harar lives between worlds, African and Arabian, ancient and modern, sacred and untamed. And walking through its streets feels less like visiting a city than stepping into a story still being told. Long before the Nile became Egypt's river, it began here in the Ethiopian highlands. Known locally as Tis Isat, meaning smoking water, the Blue Nile falls thunder from the plateau west of Lake Tana in a curtain of white water and mist. Though seasonal rains change its volume dramatically, the falls remain among Ethiopia's most powerful natural spectacles. And their sound arrives before the view itself. A place where roaring water crashes into deep gorges, where rainbows drift through clouds of spray, and where dense green vegetation clings to cliffs soaked constantly by mist. Footpaths wind past fig trees and stone villages, while the river surges endlessly through volcanic rock below. The Blue Nile itself will continue northward for thousands of kilometers, eventually merging with the White Nile in Sudan, before flowing toward the Mediterranean Sea. Entire civilizations depended on waters that first gathered in these Ethiopian mountains. But standing beside the falls, history feels secondary to sensation. The vibration beneath your feet, the cold mist against your skin, the sheer force of water moving through the landscape with unstoppable momentum. It feels less like watching a river and more like witnessing the beginning of something immense. In the far south of Ethiopia lies one of Africa's most culturally diverse regions. The Omo Valley is home to dozens of ethnic groups, many of whom continue traditions, ceremonies, and ways of life shaped over centuries beside the Omo River. Anthropologists consider the wider region one of the most important areas in the study of early human history. But the valley is remembered less for archaeology than for presence. A place where red earth roads cut through acacia woodland, where cattle move slowly beneath open skies, and where villages appear beside rivers lined with palms and tall grass. Body paint, beadwork, scarification, and ceremonial clothing transform daily life into living visual expression. Dust rises golden in evening light, while drums echo across the landscape after sunset. Among the most recognizable communities are the Mercy women, known for traditional lip plates, and the Hamar people, whose jumping ceremonies mark the transition into adulthood. These customs remain deeply tied to identity, family, and belonging. But the Omo Valley is not frozen in time. Modern pressures continue to reshape the region, creating tension between preservation and change. And perhaps that complexity is what makes the valley feel so human. A place carrying both ancient continuity and an uncertain future beneath the same sky. Before many European kingdoms existed, Axum ruled as one of the great powers of the ancient world. From this northern Ethiopian city, the kingdom of Axum controlled trade routes connecting Africa, Arabia, and the Mediterranean nearly 2,000 years ago. Historians once placed it alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the era's most influential civilizations. And traces of that empire still rise from the earth. A place where giant stone obelisks stand tilted against the sky, where underground tombs disappear beneath ancient fields, and where weathered ruins sit quietly among modern streets. The carved stelae, some reaching over 20 meters tall, were created from single blocks of granite using engineering methods still difficult to fully explain. According to Ethiopian tradition, Axum is also believed to house the Ark of the Covenant inside Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Whether history or legend, the belief has shaped the spiritual identity of the nation for centuries. And that mixture of myth and history defines Axum completely. Because here, the line between archaeology and faith grows beautifully uncertain. The past does not feel distant in Axum. It feels guarded. High in southeastern Ethiopia, the Bale Mountains unfold like a world suspended above the clouds. This massive alpine region contains Africa's largest area of high-altitude moorland, with plateaus rising above 4,000 meters. The ecosystem here is so isolated that many of its species exist nowhere else on Earth. And the landscape carries an almost dreamlike stillness. A place where giant heather forests disappear into mist, where frost glitters across open grasslands at sunrise, and where winding roads climb through valleys filled with wildflowers and cold mountain streams. The air feels thin and sharp. Silence stretches across the plateau, broken only by wind moving through the grass. Then, if luck allows, appears the Ethiopian wolf. One of the rarest canines on Earth, these rust-colored predators move gracefully through the moorlands hunting giant mole rats beneath the soil. Few animals embody the fragility of Ethiopia's wilderness more clearly than they do. The Bale Mountains feel gentle compared to the drama of the Simiens, yet perhaps even more haunting. A landscape of quiet distance where nature reveals itself slowly to those patient enough to wait. At the source of the Blue Nile lies a lake that feels less like open water and more like a floating archive of Ethiopian history. Lake Tana is Ethiopia's largest lake, scattered with islands and hidden monasteries that preserved religious manuscripts, paintings, and treasures through centuries of political upheaval. Some monasteries remained inaccessible to outsiders for generations. And much of the lake still moves at an older rhythm. A place where papyrus boats glide silently across silver water, where fishermen cast nets beneath pale morning fog, and where forested islands emerge slowly through the mist, like half-remembered dreams. Church bells echo faintly across the shoreline, while birds sweep low above reeds glowing green beneath afternoon light. Inside the monasteries, ancient murals cover circular walls in vivid reds, golds, and deep blues. Stories of saints, kings, and angels unfold across paintings, protected by isolation and devotion alike. But perhaps the real magic of Lake Tana exists in its quietness. Not silence exactly, but calm. The feeling of a landscape that has spent centuries protecting memory from the noise of the outside world. More than any other city in Africa, Addis Ababa feels like a meeting point between past and future. Founded in the late 19th century by Emperor Menelik II, Ethiopia's capital now sits more than 2,300 meters above sea level, making it one of the highest major cities on Earth. It is home to the headquarters of the African Union, giving the city a political importance that reaches far beyond Ethiopia itself. And yet, Addis remains deeply personal. A place where traffic circles around eucalyptus-covered hills, where Orthodox churches stand beside jazz clubs and modern towers, and where coffee ceremonies continue in quiet corners despite the speed of urban life. Markets overflow with spices, textiles, and incense, while music drifts from small cafes long after sunset. Then there is the coffee itself. Because Ethiopia is widely considered the birthplace of coffee, and nowhere expresses that heritage more fully than Addis Ababa. Roasted beans crackle over charcoal fires, while thick, aromatic smoke fills the room before the first cup is poured slowly into small ceramic cups. Addis does not reveal itself through monuments alone. It reveals itself through rhythm, conversation, music, the warmth of people lingering together over coffee while the city moves around them. And in many ways, that spirit becomes the perfect final introduction to Ethiopia itself. Ethiopia is not a country that fades when the journey ends. It stays with you in fragments. The silence of Lalibela's stone churches, the endless cliffs of the Simien Mountains disappearing into cloud, the glowing salt fields of the Danakil where the earth still feels unfinished, the echo of prayer in Gondar, and the slow rhythm of coffee ceremonies in Addis Ababa. But beyond the landscapes, beyond the history, what remains most is the feeling. A feeling that this land has endured through centuries without losing itself. Ancient traditions still live here, not behind museum glass, but in daily life. Faith still shapes mornings. Mountains still guard monasteries hidden in the highlands. And across deserts, valleys, and cities, Ethiopia continues moving to a rhythm entirely its own. This is one of Africa's oldest civilizations, but also one of its most alive, a place where geology, culture, and memory exist together in extraordinary depth. And perhaps that is the hidden side of Ethiopia so few truly see. Not simply a destination, but a world of stories carved into stone, carried through generations, and written across the landscape itself. Long after the road ends, Ethiopia remains. Quietly, powerfully, unforgettable,